Recording.
Do we have everybody?
I hope so. Paula's gone.
No, she's there.
Oh, she's not on mine.
I think there's just a limited number that the thing can display at any given moment, but
Yeah,
okay.
There are 20 people on right now, but only 8 people have cameras on.
Okay.
And I will monitor if somebody comes on. I'll make sure they get in.
That's a good thing because it helps minimize the bandwidth that gets thrown out there.
Yep.
Sometimes that can be a bit of a problem. Okay, we'll reconvene to open session. And if Mark, you could give us a brief report.
Yeah. We had discussions about 3 leaves during our meeting, and the 3 leaves were approved. Or excuse me, the 1 leave was not approved and 2 leaves were approved. The vote was not unanimous on one of them. And so we did approve 2 leaves and denied a leave request. And we had discussions about employment and hiring of superintendent and personnel.
Okay. Mr. Chavez, if you would mind, lead us in our flag salute, and if everybody else would please mute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. We're at informational. We are at item A, autism acceptance video.
Okay.
Hello.
Kelly,
Hello.
you can share, Kelly.
I wondered if I could screen share. So April is Autism Acceptance Month, and we have Amanda Pearson is with us here at the board meeting. And there's been a lot of changes in the last several years about autism has been an exploding disability, as everyone is now aware, and it used to be awareness of autism, but we're really moving into helping the public know that there are many different diverse types of autism, and it's not just knowing about it, but it's knowing how to help people cope and be accepted, not just in our little school district, but in society in general. So Amanda, who is our SDC teacher at Blosser, interviewed many folks in our district and students who have autism. And so I'm going to share a video with the student's voice about just how autism is expressed for them and what their needs are. So with that, let me see if I can.
Hey, Kelly, before you go on,
Yeah.
can you give us a little bit of a description of the range of autism?
You know what? I'm going to let Amanda, just because this is her project, and I will let her field that if you can unmute yourself, Amanda. But, you know, autism is a disability that, yes, has students who you might not even know have autism, all the way to students who aren't able to speak or able to read. And so it's very diverse. And while I'm getting ready to screen share, Amanda, do you want to add to that?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, so autism is a spectrum. We've heard of that. So we're trying to get away from labels. It used to be we'd say there's high functioning autism and there's low functioning autism and everything in between. So like Kelly said, we could have kiddos who are nonverbal, who need a lot of one-on-one support, all the way to very high functioning, brilliant humans that you'll see in this video. I'm so excited. Thank you for having us and watching it.
All right, so I'm gonna screen share. Oh, you know, Mark, I need a password. Let's see if it'll let me do it.
You're on.
Hi, what's your name?
Chris.
Chris. And you're in 2nd grade, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were talking about sensory overload and how it can affect you, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about your sensory overload?
Yes.
What is it? The light?
The lights.
Yeah. The lights bother you. How do they bother you?
Because they're so minor.
Mono, yes. And this is the word that you were describing, the sound that the lights make, right?
Yeah.
And it hurts your eyes and your head, right?
Yeah.
What are some ways that we help with that kind of sensory overload? Do you want to show us what we do?
Yeah.
What do we do when the lights are bothering us?
Turn them out.
Turn them off. You want to turn the lights off?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Show us how you turn the lights off. Other way. We push it like that.
Okay, good. Okay, so what is neurodiversity?
Well, if you think about neurons, right, those are the little things in your brain that help us communicate. And most brains are very similar in their structure. And they do the same things, but some brains are different. And so diversity means different, right? And so neurodiversity means that your neurons are a little bit different from everybody else, and they communicate a little bit differently.
So the old school idea that we need to change the person who is neurodivergent is dated. We now know that we need to change the environment and the strategies and the tools.
What I think is most important for students and families and our community to know is that we want to not necessarily put people in a category like, oh, I'm neurodiverse, I'm neurotypical, or this person has OCD, or this person has autism. They're just the kid that sits next to me in class.
What's your name?
Dylan.
Dylan, did your mom explain to you what the word neurodiversity means?
Yeah.
What do you tell you that all brains are wired differently?
Yeah, I know.
What do you know about that?
Well, some people aren't autistic and some are.
Hey.
I'm sensitive to sound. And sensitive to smell.
What kind of noises are tough for you? If you were in a room with a lot of people and it was loud, would that be challenging for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. How would it make you feel? Right? Exactly. I like your interpretive movement to how sound makes you feel. Yes, I agree. And if you were in a place where you couldn't do that, maybe what would you do? Would you, Neurodiversity.
So I feel like neurodiversity is how we can think about brains that function in ways that we have not yet captured in what we would call a typical or neurotypical way. So, but I like to think of brains as existing on a continuum. And so we have some understanding about how a brain works, and then we could think of that as being typical. But as you start to move along the continuum, you can see that brains really are like flowers. They're all unique, they're all different, and I think that neurodiversity really reflects
So
that.
what do you want to be when you grow up?
Politician, probably.
And what kind of politician?
Maybe like a representative or a state senator.
I love that.
Maybe work it up. Vice president, president, maybe.
How do you think your autism affects you?
Little to none, because I think I have low functioning.
So what does that mean to you, low functioning autism?
Nothing really.
Yeah. It's just a label.
Because
right?
like if people say, "Oh, no, do you have high function? Do you have low function?" I'm just like in my head, I'm just repeating, "I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn. It's autism. I don't give a damn."
I am Aiden. I am not autism, right? Yeah. High functioning or low functioning. Yeah. Right.
Plus, if I were to be elected president, I would be the first autistic president.
So what challenges does autism bring to you? Can you think about eye contact? Is it hard for you?
It's pretty hard.
It makes you uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do people demand eye contact from you, or are they pretty acceptable?
At times.
Uh-huh. And what do you do?
Just tell them that I don't really enjoy doing it.
Yeah, I think that's so great that you self-advocate like that. Yes, 1 in every 8 person in the U.S. is neurodivergent, but only 50% know about it. So that's a lot of people, right?
And that just proves we need to bring it.
Ooh, Aiden.
2042.
2042 for president. It's the idea that our brains are all wired different, and we should celebrate that. That should be a difference that we celebrate. Do you have any thoughts on that? Or
that I was gonna say that that people don't have to do the same stuff as the other people do.
Absolutely.
The people, like everyone are different than each other.
I agree. Don't you think it's a great thing that we are all different? It makes life interesting, right?
We are who we are.
World, right?
You have to love yourself.
So true. Yes. Oh, I got goosebumps. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I love animals.
I think barbershop or construction, maybe. Working at the restaurant, maybe.
And I think that's something about the journey of life, you guys. I'm glad you said that, because I was thinking of something earlier. Amanda had mentioned she's been a lot of different things, and now she's a teacher. And this is the process we go through. Like, these are the jobs you would like to try and like to be. And as you go through the journey, that job might take you to another job that you hadn't even thought about. So that's the cool part. Just exploring it and enjoying the ride and knowing you and what works for you and what does not work for you.
That's it.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Amanda, for that amazing, just a look at our students and all of their different experiences. And, you know, I'd like us to get to, and we're moving in the direction where it's not that kid with autism, that's Aiden, and he's going to be president, and he sits next to me in class. And so that's really what this project and program is all about, the month of April. So thanks for letting us share.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Amanda, and thank you, Kelly. That was just great.
Yeah.
It's like watching the All-Star game with you and Amanda and Sue.
Hey, thank you. Let's see, we are at the audit report.
Okay, well, I guess I will introduce our auditor. Michael Ash will be joining us, and he is going to present the audit report. I did want to remind everyone that typically this is something that comes to the board in January. However, due to COVID circumstances, the state had extended that deadline. And so we are now presenting in April, and next year, I think we will be back on our regular schedule for this. So I'll let you take it away, Michael.
Thank you, Nikki. Good afternoon. First, I just want to thank the board for inviting me to the meeting this evening. Yes, the 2020 audit was one like no other. I could have never imagined having to do an audit completely remote without ever visiting the school district. So, you know, normally we visit the school sites and then we're at the district office at least 2 times. So I really want to thank Nikki and her team. I know it's not easy to have to upload document after document after document. You can imagine how many documents are involved for an audit. So they really worked hard to get us everything that we needed, and I'm happy that we were able to meet the March 31st deadline. So I'll just do a quick rundown of the audit results and then answer any questions that you might have. So for the audit itself, it's really a pretty boring year as far as the audit goes, because a lot of the new standards were delayed because of COVID. So there wasn't a lot of change between the 2020 report and the 2019 report. We were able to give an unmodified opinion on the financial statements, which that's a clean opinion. That's the best opinion that you can get. That means that in our independent auditor's opinion, the financial statements that you see are fairly stated in all material respects. Now, because you're a school district, we have to do your audit under what's called government auditing standards. What that means is that we're not giving an opinion on your internal controls over financial reporting. But if we do come across anything that we deem to be a material weakness or a significant deficiency, we do have to report it in an audit finding. And you did have one audit finding related to the financial statements, and that was related to ASB, so Associated Student Body. It's a very common finding in school districts. Associated student bodies are just very hard to control, you know, because you're dealing with offsite people, you're dealing with a lot of cash. It's very rare that you'll see a school district audit without an ASB finding. So there was an ASB finding. I know the district is working very hard and has always worked hard to have trainings and give the like the FCMAT, you know, ASB manual to all employees, and you know they're trying really hard, but it is very difficult to control. The next auditor's opinion that we give is on federal awards. So because the district spends $750,000 in federal money, it's also called a single audit. And there's a very set way that we have to pick the programs that we look at and the requirements that we have to look at. So for this year, and usually because it is your largest program, we do look at the child nutrition cluster quite a bit. Now in future years with all the CARES Act funding, I would imagine that we'll have to, you know, pivot a little and look at those funds quite a bit in the upcoming years. But for 2020, we looked at the child nutrition cluster, unmodified, clean opinion on that, no findings to report, no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies. And then finally, the last opinion that we give is on state compliance. So every school district, county office of education, charter school has to have a state compliance opinion. So there's an audit guide that comes out each year. And it covers everything from attendance reporting, instructional time, instructional materials hearing, school accountability report cards. So just, you know, a plethora of compliance items that they ask us to look at. So you did have an unmodified opinion on state compliance. There was one very minor finding related to the school accountability report cards. So one thing they ask us to look at is there are facilities inspection tools that are conducted, and then that information gets reported on the school accountability report card. If there are any discrepancies, we have to report them. And there was just one minor discrepancy there. The other finding was a little bit larger. It's related to unduplicated pupil counts. And for this district specifically, it was related to English learners. So with the CalPADS reporting, there were several EL students that were classified as EL in CalPADS that should not have been there. So that did result in a finding and a question cost. I know the district is working very diligently and has a plan in place to address that this year and going forward. So, but that was it. All in all, very very clean audit, great team to work with. And like I said, I've really missed being out in your community. You know, I feel like I'd never gone more than a few months without being up in Mendocino County and Willits. It's a great county and just a beautiful community. So hopefully, fingers crossed that the next time I present to you will be in person. So that's all that I had. Are there any questions that I could help answer related to the audit?
I have two.
Sure.
The first one is on page 37. It's in relationship to the 2010 election Series B bonds. There's a statement in here that I don't recall seeing it in prior years. It says, the district is eligible for a cash subsidy payment from the United States Treasury for the qualified school construction bonds. Can you explain?
Yes, and the district might be able to, but so with qualified QZAB bonds, there is a forgiveness of interest component that goes along with those. And that has always been in there. So the district does receive an interest subsidy on those bonds. Nikki might be able to explain it too, but they do get a subsidy on that each year that offsets that interest.
Got it. Okay. Then the only other one was, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're looking at, like, for example, receipts and things like that for like the student body fund that you mentioned, you look at a certain number of receipts, or like say the CalPads, for example, you look at a certain subset of that larger amount of information. You determine if there's an error, and then you extrapolate that error out based on it as if you had reviewed the entire set of information, but you don't actually review the entire set of information. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Unfortunately, audits have sampling involved. It would be, way too difficult to look at every transaction. So especially with the CalPads finding, yes, we did extrapolate that error out to the entire population. With ASB, sometimes it depends. Sometimes we'll expand our sample if we do see some issues there that we want to look at more. But yes, you are correct in the fact that we're not looking at every single item in those populations.
Okay.
And the ASB issues were not that it wasn't a legitimate expense, it's that we don't have our documentation in place.
Right.
And just as with the other audits, with the single audit for our financials for federal, that will be a significant thing to look at next year with all the COVID dollars.
Anybody else have any questions? Cool. Without any other debate on the budget report, do we need to, it's informational, so we don't need to accept it, but thank you, Michael. I appreciate your help.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the questions. Those are two great questions, so thank you.
Very good.
Michael.
All right.
I just wanted, before we move on, to let you know that this was at least the craziest year ever for an audit, with nothing being done on site and everything done distantly. I'm not surprised we had errors in EL. I'm not surprised we had some ASB issues, but based on the year we had, Nikki and the business office did a fabulous job to get us ready and get us documented and set for this year. So I appreciate the work that Michael and his group do and that our business office does to get ready. This was
when you look at the complexities of the finances for a school district and all the players that are involved, having been on the board now for 10 years, I've yet to see an audit that didn't find something, albeit in every case that I've seen so far, always minor, but and hopefully they stay that way. But I'm not surprised to find some minor errors from time to time.
This is the verification for the board that Nikki gets an A.
Thanks, Mark.
I agree. We ready to move on? We are item C, the GASB 75 actuarial valuation.
So I just wanted to present this to you. This was actually done several months ago, and it doesn't require an approval, but in talking with the county office, they did recommend that it would be a good practice to just make it available to the board and to the public. So we do as a district provide what they call other post-employment benefits. And so this is health benefits for retired individuals. And we are required by law to conduct actuarial studies. There's a process by which we have to conduct a full study every 2 years. And then on the off years, they do what they call a roll forward, where they still review it, but there are some abbreviated steps that they are legally able to include in that process. So it costs us a little bit less on those years. But essentially what they have to look at is, what is our liability related to these benefits? What are our future expected costs related to this? And so in some districts, they take this information and they do various accounting, such as pre-funding for it or setting up trust accounts in order to account for those expenses. In our district, we do not operate that way. We do what we call pay as you go. So we have the annual expenses included in our regular budget. It shows up in a couple of different ways depending on what options the individual chooses or which age category they're in, because it could be that we are paying directly for their health premium. It could be that they have aged out of our medical coverage and are on Medicare, in which case we pay some of the supplemental costs related to that in lieu of doing the district plan. And so those costs related to that each year are just expensed in each year in which they occur. But we are still required to conduct this actuarial study regardless of the fact that we do pay as we go. And so this report is the annual report related to that.
And the rationale behind that is you could have gigantic retirement benefits that never really show up on your books because they're not employees. And so we have to be transparent about those dollars. And in some districts, they're significant enough where it's part of a designated fund balance, where they put it out there and every year they make sure they have a set aside for their retirement cost.
A lot of this became, I think, really necessary. In the past, there were many districts who would have like lifetime benefits or uncapped benefits. And so in that case, when you're dealing with an actuarial study, you're really having to look at, you know, demographic data and make estimates based on lifespans and things like that. Because if you're paying for those benefits through someone's life, then you have to have a way to think about that and plan for that. Ours is still a significant expense to us each year, but we have benefits which are provided for a certain number of years. So I think that's probably less of a factor, but we are still required to follow the same process.
I know for the longest time, this information wasn't reported out, wasn't part of the financial information that most government agencies even made public. And then was about 10, 12 years ago, the Gatsby thing got a lot of got a lot of push to make sure that the public had an opportunity to see what all of these liabilities were hanging out over everybody's heads, over the taxpayers' heads. And so that's the reason for this reporting out of this information, so that everybody has an opportunity to see exactly how, if we closed our doors to tomorrow, what would be the district's liability to all the employees that are still out there.
Right. And it is now, because of, like you said, some of the law changes where it's now mandated that we do this, it is also part of our audit report. So the auditors take this actuarial study, they incorporate it into the total financial statements. And so it is included that way. And that was why it didn't occur to me to send this out to you guys separately, because it is rolled into that. But you know, it's just probably good practice to still put this out as its own entity and just let people have access to that.
So I do have a question with respect to how we manage this. You mentioned the fact that some agencies pre-fund these OPEB liabilities, and we are in a pay-as-you-go model. Is there a point where we would consider pre-funding, and at what point is that beneficial to us, or is it even ever beneficial to us?
You know, I would have to do further research. When I've looked at it in the past, the amount of additional work that goes into that process did not seem worthwhile for our district. I can certainly revisit that and look at it again and confer with some other folks who maybe are more knowledgeable about it.
Well, I know part of it is we've never been in a position, at least not yet, and maybe we will be at some point soon, but we've never been in a financial position where we could afford to pre-fund. But I do know there of agencies that have done this. My old fire department, for example, did. And I know that there were some benefits to be gained from that, but I don't know to what extent those benefits were. But they were in a position to do that.
And I'm not sure like what the tipping point is. Like at what point, at what liability size is it more beneficial to go one way or the other? So I will look at that again. It's been several years since I have looked at that information. So I'll take a look at that again.
Thank you.
When I've seen it, it's been basic aid districts who've been doing it because they have the funding up front to put it out there and then not have to worry about it. It's kind of like a drawing from your savings account and you don't have to worry about it.
Well, yeah, but I mean, as an example, if you take PERS or STIRS, for example, if you pre-fund your liability with either one of those, then the actuarial report should come back and your contribution rate, the district's contribution rate, should drop significantly, and possibly even the contribution rate of the employees if you pre-funded enough. So,
right.
So
it would change your 3-year projection for sure.
Right. It boils down to it's a pay me now or pay me later kind of thing. But the real question boils down to is there a cost associated with the pay as you go that could be lessened if we actually had the funds to pre-fund. So
yeah.
The only thing off the top of my head that I can think of where it would be an advantage is certainly when we get our credit ratings done, that they're looking at your total liabilities. And so, you know, it potentially could be beneficial in a situation like that. However, we did just complete that process for our bond and we still had a very strong credit rating. So I don't think that in our case, it disadvantaged us in that process, but that would be one factor districts would consider.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, Nikki. Any other questions for the report? All right, we will move on. I believe we're at the MCOE certification of the 2020/21 first and second interim budget reports.
You're on a roll, Nikki.
All the fun stuff. So they rolled it into one letter, I believe, their approval of the first interim and second interim. And this is just informational to the board. They agree with our filings and nothing jumped out at me as being of concern. And so I think it's pretty routine.
Okay.
We're not getting the mean letter from the county saying you're over budget.
Yeah, they're not screaming at us to be more careful right now.
Yeah, we're not unqualified.
I think their big focus right now is just reminding everyone to really proceed with caution, you know, doing our planning with COVID and such, which I think that's and across the board for all districts, you know, having to really be thoughtful about that.
We are at item 9, WTA comments. Tessa? I thought I saw her out
Everyone?
there.
Came out of the dark.
I'm here. Yeah, I just lost my green screen. Oh well. Happy days are here again. We have kids back on campuses and they are thrilled and teachers are thrilled. And it's just, it's a whole lot better. I actually remained in remote teaching, but I'm hearing a lot of excitement being generated. Jeannie King had forwarded a no on BioGrow flyer to me, and I sent that out to all of the members. Thank you for sharing that with us. There, again, it's a political issue, and there were some people that thought it was a great idea to get involved and some that didn't. So we're just going to leave it up to each of the individuals to decide if they want to pursue that or not. It does have a connection to our students and how it could affect them ultimately down the road. So I thank you for sending that to me. After the executive board meeting on Monday, the high school reported that they had all grade levels present and that about 38% of their population is attending in-person class. At Bechtel, they've been collaborating on classroom management and coming up with some really good strategies. And we finally have a site rep for Bechtel Grove, and that would be Cameron Ludwig. And we're really excited that she is going to finish out this school year and hopefully be able to continue helping Bechtel Grove next year. At Blosser, the long-awaited roof repairs have started, and we are so happy to see that going on. I guess there have been some challenges with trucks being on the playground and debris around, so that it's kind of confined even more so the student movement on campus. But everybody is doing a really good job of working it out. Let's see. 2 concerns were brought up that I haven't had a chance to talk with Mr. Westerberg about, but it was reported that one room still has no heat, and we thought we had new systems in all the classrooms on Blosser. You want to say something about that now or wait till I'm done?
Tessa, what room are you talking about? Is it a Blosser room?
Okay. Yes, over in the wing that first got started with the rooms, I know it's Eileen Travis's room, maybe room 2, I'm not sure what room number it is, but there's portable heaters in that room.
Right. All 5 of those rooms are having their heating and cooling replaced. Those were put in a long time ago, and they're residential heaters. They're not commercial grade. We've already put the PO, we have them in place, and those will get done. There's also a room at Brookside that's going to get done this weekend. I had to pay overtime because we're short-staffed. We're putting one in this Sunday at Brookside. So.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. Thank you so much for getting that taken care of. Let's see, the other concern that was expressed from both Blosser and Brookside was that there is no shelter for eating during inclement weather, that the students are having to stand in very small strips of space underneath the walkways when it's raining. Hopefully, I mean, we should have good weather going forward, although we need more rain, and I hope there's more rain. But educators were asking if it was possible to get some sort of tents or canopies set up so that there's a way for the children to eat outside and not have indoor eating. At Brookside, I guess there was an issue with toilets not being ready when school opened, when the kids came back in. My understanding is it's being taken care of, but that was kind of concerning to have kids back on campus and not have facilities.
Yeah, it was the fixtures by room 9 and 10. Our 1952 plumbing chase decided to, let's just say, dump at the wrong time. And so we had quite a treat trying to figure out how to get those parts to fix that. We had to retrofit that 1950 into 2021 hardware. And so, yeah, it took us a while, though we had that torn apart for a while. It's back up and running now, but yeah, that was pretty untimely, but not unexpected. Every day I expect something like this to go on in our facility.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. Overall, one of the concerns was that returning from spring break, we didn't have testing in place for students. And none of us likes to be compared to Ukiah, but Ukiah isn't the only school district that had a plan in place for when the students came back. They were tested on the Monday before coming back in. And our protocol for this was to ask nicely. By asking nicely, the good people said something, and maybe not everybody got the message about needing to quarantine if you went out. I know they caught a few kids they came on campus and said something about having traveled or going to an amusement park over the break. And so some of them we caught before they got back on campus. I know that Marion has been working to get the testing situation set up, but it was unfortunate that we didn't have something more official in place for letting the kids back on campus after potentially being exposed, I guess. Okay. And then I saved the best for last. This is the first time that I am aware of. We've had 8 applications for WTA scholarships from either members of WTA or other students. And we're really excited about that, not just because we have 8, but because we also have a lot of money that we haven't spent. We're going to be able to give those students a pretty good sized scholarship, and we're happy about that. I don't have anything to say except for go Aiden 2022.
Perfect. Thank you, Tessa. We are at, I believe, Dan.
Good evening, everyone. It's good to see everybody back in school. It's good to have little screamy Mimis running around. That's always been missed. Looks like things are doing pretty well. Evolution, as far as making things work, seems to be working out pretty good. And I'd like to thank Mark for past week, we've signed a couple MOUs. I appreciate that. And let's just keep everything rolling along. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. We are at board comments, and let's go ahead and start with Paula.
Hello. I've really been kind of out and around. I've been able to look things over at Sanhedrin. It was really exciting, the great information they gave to the newspaper, and their kids that are just graduating right through all of this. I am at the high school kind of regularly, and they seem to be getting their stuff together. There was some concern by some about the animals that kind of roam the area. mostly dogs. Most of them are on leashes, which is really good. But there does seem to be some misunderstanding about where they need to go. And I'm hoping that that gets settled. I know that the farm was offering a little spot for some people's dogs if they had to be, if they couldn't be left alone, that they could go to the farm area in some little area. I didn't go check out the area, but that seemed to work out really good. It'd just be nice if maybe once again, we made it real kind of consistent at all school sites about pets and things like that. I went over to Bechtel Grove. There seemed to be some concerns with, you know, how many students could be in a class while we were in the red for COVID. And now that we're in the orange for COVID, whether or not the couple of students that I know about in particular, which is why I guess I was called over there, could start going to class now. And so my understanding is we've been orange for a week. And I'm just hoping that the couple of kids in particular that wanted to be in a classroom instead of on Zoom learning or whatever it is, would have their opportunity to go back to class and do that. And so I know Ms. Mangia can answer that probably tonight, but it would be good to know about that. And then there was also a lot of, at Bechtel and, no, I'm sorry, at Brookside and Blosser, I didn't make it to Brookside, but I did make it around Blosser, and it does look real good the way the roof is coming on and all those people work together. It's really kind of amazing. You get 2 or 3 trucks over there and then all of a sudden things kind of change overnight. It did that at the high school also, which was real fun. They're dealing with the electricity or something with the band and the auditorium and all the rest of that. But it's good to see so many things moving right along. We have been kind of concerned with reading programs. And so I really do hope that those committees really take a serious look at what the district already has. I've only talked to one teacher that seemed involved, and that issue meant that they were just going to be real upfront about the pros and the cons and the basic necessities for teaching children to learn to read, in particular, including comprehension and things like that. Since we all know that if you read something and don't know what you read, it doesn't much help that you read something. And so that's about it. I did hear that the cafeterias were gonna, you know, their funds were picking up. So I do hope that that's the case. I would like to know more about that maybe at the next board meeting. And the bathrooms I heard about, but they also had an issue at Blosser Lane. So I'm hoping that, I mean, I know that the plumbing system is old, but Blosser's the newest. So I hope that some of that gets taken care of too, that they aren't, not so much plugged, but just not, the water isn't streaming through like it could. And so that's about all. Otherwise, I don't know anything else.
Thank you, Paula. Jeannie?
I guess I'm unmuted. It's been really exciting to see kids back going to school and to see buses running and to see the whole traffic pattern back in Willits that tells you that school is happening again. It's been really fun to watch. And the first day of school at Brookside, I went before school to watch their whole process of how parents were going to drop off kids and how the buses were going to go and how the staff was going to function. And everybody had worked so hard. And I know there were some issues with neighbors that were worried about their driveways being blocked. But I've since then have gone back a few more mornings just because I walk in the morning, and I've come to see how more fluid it's going and how quickly now that parents are able to drop their kids off. And it's been wonderful. And another thing that I've really enjoyed in regards to Brookside is I pick up my granddaughter on Thursdays. And so I get to watch the whole pickup process. and watching Rachel Cash out there and Jeff, but Rachel, it's like watching a dance, choreographed dance, how the whole, how everything happens just really, really well. And I really appreciate how hard everybody's worked to make that happen. I saw, when I was walking this morning, I saw Kathleen Crossman out there checking on students at each car and seeing if they, I think she was taking their temperature. But anyway, people are working really hard. The day before school started, I went and visited Brookside, Blosser, and I also stopped at Bethel Grove, and I talked to every staff member that I came across and thanked them for their hard work and reminded them that it wasn't going to be perfect, but we were all going to do our best. And everybody seemed excited about being back. So, and then I wanted to give a wonderful round of applause to the leadership class at the high school. They came up with a very COVID-friendly outreach with the youth, with the young kids, the kids of this community in regards to searching for eggs. They hid them all over town and then gave, and there was candy inside eggs and yeah, I went and looked with my granddaughter, and then I also saw families out there, little family cohorts, each going around looking for eggs with their Easter baskets. And I know Easter's not a proper term anymore, but anyway, it was just wonderful to see. And my granddaughter, and some of the eggs were gold eggs in which there was play money inside, and you got to take it to the district, to the high school office and turn it in for a real dollar. And my granddaughter was thrilled with her golden egg and her real dollar. And anyway, it was just a wonderful COVID-friendly thing for the leadership class to do for the community. And I also want to say that the other day when I dropped by the district office to turn and then start to dip down that little hill that takes you to the district office to see the roofing crews up there on Blosser Lane working on the roof. It was just really wonderful to see. So thanks everybody for all your hard work.
Okay. Diane?
Oh, okay. I want to thank Willits High School counselors, Lucy Kind, Nicole Burke, high school senior interviews, and Principal Mike Kovig as the Google Meet coordinator for this session, and seeing the seniors, and I think there was 3 16-year-olds as well graduating this year with that. Their interviews were wonderful. Their portfolios were amazing. These kids are, I could not believe, I couldn't have done that when I was 18. And they were amazing on this one. And those counselors and everyone that helped them, it was amazing. Also, watching parents picking up their kids at Brookside. There's a long line of cars, and those parents are so patient, and they're not blocking anybody's driveway or anything. They're just amazing on that part. And that was I noticed the cars didn't move for at least 15 minutes. So it could be a traffic jam, but nobody was, no one was tense. Everybody was waiting. They knew the flow and everything. Everybody's happy to be back at school. Then on my way from there to Brooks, Blosser, I saw the school buses going by, and here came the red lights on the buses. And sure enough, the bus driver comes out with the stop sign and letting the kids off, and their parents are waiting for them to take them. Everybody again is happy that the flow is going. And then the same thing at Blosser, guards are out there making sure that the parents come in an orderly way. No one's in a rush. And then seeing the roofing going on at Blosser as well. when I was picking up my binder. So yeah.
Cool. Robert?
Hello, everyone. Like everyone else, I'd like to thank all of the staff that did such good work in getting us off to a good start. Since the kids are back, it warms my heart out at the athletic fields to see all the fields full of baseball, softball, soccer, swimming. I see some construction going out at the pool out there, and boy, that's coming around pretty quick. I appreciate all the hard work from Mark and the district office to do well through this year-long COVID situation we've had. It's just exciting to see everybody out there back at it, and I appreciate everyone that made that happen. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Like everybody else, I'd like to say thank you to all of you that have made getting us back in the classroom a reality. Heard many comments and from lots and lots of people about how happy they are that their kids are back in school, and that the whole process seems to be working. I know it's a large undertaking and a lot of headaches for all the folks involved. And even more so for like Mark at the district office, having to juggle not only the COVID issues, but also the bond issues and so forth that are going forward right now. I know there are a lot of projects. The district is, for want of a better way to put it, spending a lot of money on a lot of big projects, and hopefully these things will pay dividends in the not too distant future. I got to go down to Ukiah High School yesterday and weigh in about 50 wrestlers. So they're resurrecting their wrestling program. I'm not so certain it's the smartest thing to be doing, but they're gung ho and going ahead with it. And I hopefully they do well. With respect to this COVID thing, if you're paying attention to the news, please continue to utilize good common sense, take precautions. We don't want what's going on in Michigan to come and start happening here. So please, again, continue to use the precautions that are here until such time as we can put these precautions behind us. But right now, we just need to still, the pandemic's not over. We've got a break right now, and let's make sure we keep that break. That's all I've got. Mark. You're muted.
No particular order here. I'm just going to go through my list. Just some bond issue updates. There's not a building that doesn't have stuff going on in it. We're putting in new windows. The bubble for the pool's getting done. We're putting in a storage shed at the pool and at Brookside. We have obviously Blosser's roof. Tonight on the agenda is the roofs at the high school, Bechtel and Brookside, and the high school parking lot. We will have all 4 of our major roofs done and the high school parking lot done by early July, which is a major feat to get those done and to have them completed. We'll also have multiple places where we've had upgrades. The high school science rooms, Bechtel now has real science rooms in them, has 2 of them. And the sinks all work, the lights have been changed, the room was painted, the power works, they're real science rooms. And so the maintenance and custodial staff have been just knocking it out of the park. We've been doing things that we haven't been able to do before and getting it done. But as you know, every day we come and our 1952 buildings are going to throw us a curveball now and then. And it usually has to do with plumbing or heating and cooling. Most of the heating and cooling will have resolved by midsummer, but the plumbing will continue to be an issue for us. The testing, Marion's put a great testing group together. If you haven't got tested, I recommend you go do it. It's super easy. You walk in, they give you your stuff, and in 15 minutes, you get a text message on your phone. I mean, it's really easy, and it's really well done. They've put all the training necessary in place. I'm really pleased with our start to get students back into session. That went really well. Teachers did a great job of embracing the change. I am going to meet with the principals on Friday. Now that we're in the next level, now we can start to look at some of our issues. The one remaining issue I still have are independent study students who chose independent study because distance learning wasn't working. We need to get them back into the classroom if they want to come back in. And so, although 3 foot is now available, the real issue is that moving to this tier allows us, there's no more, the 16 limit doesn't really apply anymore. This is really the space and distance rules we're under. But just like everything else, I'm not advocating we're going to go back to 26 kids in a classroom. We may bump to 18 as long as the room is conducive to hold it. But doing that would allow us to bring our independent studies back in. And so we need to bump up in size, but we need to do it smart and we need to do it tactfully. And so I'm going to work with the principals and we're going to figure that plan out to deal with our independent study students. They deserve the right to come back into session. So one of the reasons they went to packets was because it was too hard to distance learn. So we've known that all along. Sherwood I can speak to very clearly because I'm their principal, and we've adjusted nicely up there to get everybody back in place, and it's operating very smoothly. Some other things with high school in regards to sports, just like in other things, we didn't jump out and do every single sport we can do. We did the sports that were conducive, more conducive to COVID than things like wrestling and football and things like that. It just makes good sense to not try and jump back into what we were before. So we've got those back in place. It's nice to see kids out playing and fans in the stands. Mike is also putting together a high school graduation that's much more similar to what we're used to. Unfortunately, there were some things that people really liked from last year that we got to continue now to do. So there'll be banners going up around town, and we're still going to do our, it's not called a parade, it's called a processional. It's only a parade and you need a permit for a parade. It's a processional if you don't block off streets. And so we're going to do our processional through town. And they're also trying to put together a prom. And so Mike and Marion have been working on how do you test, how do you do a prom. We're talking about using the new barn at the ag farm as a facility because we can open the doors open wide and have good ventilation and those kind of things. So we're trying to get back to some sense of normal, but we are certainly not opening the floodgates. We're still being restrictive. We're still doing the right things. A couple other things. Summer school is going to be much more robust than in normal years. I know all the buildings are looking at a summer school program, and I'm going to get Paula to give me a thumbs up on this because I'm working with Nuestra Alianza, and I'm going to use COVID money to help fund their program so they can keep their 100 students, because otherwise they would have had to split into, they can only have smaller numbers in a room. And so I'm going to work with Nuestra using some of our COVID money to make sure they're fully funded and they can run their program. And their focus this year is math, which is awesome. And they're going to take over Brooks or Blosser for most of July. And so it's a great program. Our kids benefit a ton from being in it. And so our liaisons that we've hired are going to help in the program, it'll be a really good experience for us. And so this is one of the rare opportunities where we have COVID funding that I can use to help with learning loss mitigation. And so I can help New Estra really put on a big program like they normally do with the staff they're required to do it. So I knew you'd like that one, Paula. But this is a unique year. There's going to be a lot of crazy funding things that go on. One of the things I'm going to use some of the COVID funding for is at the high school, Bechtel and Brookside, we have ancient single pane glass that runs down those hallways. That single pane glass has been painted on, the windows don't operate very well. It really hurts ventilation. And so what I'm going to do is use some of our COVID funding, because we're allowed to use it to enhance heating, cooling, and ventilation, to take those windows out and put in low E windows so you don't need the curtain, and windows at the bottom that actually operate and open so we can have some air and breeze. It'll make the outside of the building look better and create the ventilation we need. And we're going to supplement our bond by using some of those COVID funds, just like I did with the high school heating and cooling, because there was no air exchange in the high school main building. Because of that, I was able to use COVID funds to get all of that heating and cooling in that main building taken care of without having to tap the bond to do it. So that's one of my goals, is to make sure we look for all those available fundings to get these projects done. It's going to take a lot of effort to get 1950 buildings into 2020, but we're getting a lot of the big stuff done right now. So the last big project for the bond that's not going to happen this summer, because we would never have time, is at Brookside, the west wing. We need to take those old portables out, put in 4 new classrooms and a bathroom. That has to get done, but that can't get done this summer. But I do have the drawings and everything being done, and the site work prep and all of the potential funding and DSA stuff that needs to happen. That'll all be in place so that project can start early. As soon as school ends next year, you have to hit the ground running. So I think that's it for right now, but.
I forgot one thing I'd like to mention, and that was at the last board meeting, many of you might recall that I mentioned that I'd like to see us throw resources at a minimum at our K-3 reading program to ensure that our kids, as they leave grade 3, are on or above grade level in their literacy skills. And that kind of opened a little bit of a floodgate, because I've been contacted by a number of people on our district. And I want to say a special thanks to Jeannie, and also to Kathleen and Nancy and Marion Lone for contacting me and working out and helping work on identifying ways to move forward with this. Right now, we're in conversation mode only, but I know Kathleen is polling her teachers, and hopefully Nancy is as well. But I'd like to extend this to be a district-wide conversation for how we can improve literacy. Again, I want to focus primarily on either K-3 or even K-5, because I want to focus the resources in such a way that we know we're going to get success. And I'd like to see this be very collaborative, and I'd like to make sure that everybody that feels like they have something to offer for this, to make sure that their voices are heard. No decisions are being made yet, but like Mark said, between the COVID funding and learning loss mitigation funds, the state and federal governments seem to be figuring out that it's important that we throw some more money at education. It looks like on the horizon, there's opportunity for significant change in the way we conduct business. And I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to voice their idea, especially if they know about best practices that are working in other places. I want to hear about it. So I want to make sure we keep moving this conversation forward. Again, nothing is off the table as far as I'm concerned. but I'm really determined that that somehow we make a massive dent in how we handle literacy, especially at our younger ages, because I know that it will pay off big time as we move forward. So again, I want to thank you to all those that have already become involved, and I hope that everybody that wants to be involved gets involved and moves this forward. So thank you. Moving on, we are at the action discussion for public comments on items on the consent agenda. Are there any public comments for items that are on the consent agenda? Hearing none, we'll talk about the consent agenda. So first, I'd like a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
So Robert and Jeannie. Now, is there any discussion on the consent agenda, items 1 through 4? Hearing no comments, we'll move for the vote. All in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
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 Aye. We are at item C, approval of career technical education plan 2020/2021.
What we're going to do with that is we're really going to table that till another meeting. But now that it's on the agenda, I do want to say this, that the district applies for CTE funds in multiple places through Perkins Grant, CTE incentive, and other things. It's been a major push of ours to get our kids CTE endorsed. And just to let you know, we're out there getting every buck we can try and get to do that. For example, putting in a plasma cutter in the areas, getting supplies for our scrubs class. We've hired a new teacher for computer technology for next year for coding. It's really an important thing for us as a district. The ideal is to have a kid graduate who has vocational and college ready. But if you can't have both, we certainly need to have them vocationally certified so they have some skills when they leave high school. It's the whole premise behind Sanhedrin. It's also the premise behind what we need to be doing in high school. The kids have to have a skill. They have to have something they can do when they leave high school. A D minus diploma, just meeting the minimum requirements, is not acceptable anymore. And we have to make sure that the kids have those. And so there's been a significant investment in our CTE, and this funding is part of that. And so I think when Mike goes through the programs that we have and what we've added, I think you'll be very pleased to see the breadth of what goes on and the amount of students that it impacts. Obviously, this year was pretty awkward for any CTE because they tend to be hands-on. But in a normal year, it is one of our primary focuses. So even though it's on here, I'm assuming at the next meeting or the one after, Mike will give a report on CTE.
Okay, so you want to just pull that from item C? Or pull item C?
Yeah, we don't need to do anything with it tonight. There's no requirement to have a approved policy or excuse me, an approved plan.
Got it. Okay. Item D, approval of the WHS parking lot project.
Well, we did a lot of homework. SHN, our local architects and engineers in town, and I use the local folks to do our projects. And so I've been working with them for about 3 months. We put out our bid specs to renovate the high school parking lot, as well as the circle turnaround in front of the high school and the road that goes from Main Street back to the maintenance building, where those speed bumps are sometimes there and not there, and the one where you have to have your mouthpiece in when you drive over it even slow. We're going to fix all that up. And so that's all been planned out, bid specs approved. A vendor gave us a good bid who's actually a local vendor. It's Redwood Valley Paving to do the project. It came in exactly about where I thought it would. I thought it would come in at 500 and it was 515. And I'm looking forward to them taking care of business and fixing that parking lot.
Mark, are they going to take that all the way back to the CTE building?
No, we're going to talk about that once they're on site.
Okay.
We may have to spot repair through there. I would like to go back there, but before I go that far, Alex, I also need to have some conversations with the city. If the city's doing a chip coat seal this summer, like they have on other roads, I want to see if I can get them to Blosser's parking lot, their staff parking lot. It's really rough. And a chip coat seal may save it for 7 to 8 years. So I want to make sure I have funding to do that. And I've looked at what our options are. But yeah, I would love to repave it all.
Yeah, it just seems that once they're in there, that's the time to strike. It's going to be, you're not going to get it done any cheaper than when they're already there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the issue there, Alex, is it a grind the top and put 2 inches over the top, or do they have to take it all the way down? The problem with the road in from the main road in is they have to take that all out. They can't rescue that with a grind and 2 inches over the top. It's got to be completely removed.
Yeah, I expect that's probably the same. It's all the way back.
Yeah.
Okay, is there a motion to approve item D, approval of the WHS parking lot project?
I approve of the bid and contract on the Willits High School parking lot project.
So we've got a motion to approve. We have a second?
I'll second.
And it's motion and seconded. Is there any further discussion? One nice thing about this is this will take one of those things off the table for our insurance company that's been telling us year after year that we're at risk by not taking care of this particular project.
Yeah.
So any other comments? Call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Now you got a parking lot, Mark.
Okay.
So we're at E, approval of the roofing project at Brookside, Beck Grove, and the Willis High School.
So let me help answer the question about, Mark, why did you start the roof at Blosser already? Why didn't you just wait till June? Well, part of the reason I didn't wait is because we have to get into the contractor's schedules and calendars. The other reason is 2 months ago, we already did our bid walk on these roofs at the other buildings. I knew when we did the bid walk that Hendricks did the best job of evaluating the roof, looking at the roof. I mean, they measured it, they did everything. I knew they were going to come with the best bid. And because he told me when he left that this is what I think it's going to kind of be. And that's why I wanted to make sure that they were already getting this one done before they start on the other 3 buildings. So the same company that's doing Blosser has the low bid by over 200,000 on doing the other 3 buildings. They're a great company. They do a nice job. And now that we'll have Blosser completed quickly, they'll be able to hit the other 3 buildings.
Okay. Is there anything in particular? I know that they're not going to do a re-roof like above the auditorium in the main building, correct?
You mean at the high school?
Yes.
No, there's a part of that main building that they're going to look at and do a repair on. They call them scuppers. That's where it takes the water and it sends it down.
Yep.
We have an issue with the scuppers building up some water, and we have a little plan to try and fix that. But at the high school, they're doing all of the walkways, the canopied walkways that go around the high school. They're doing the math wing, the science wing, and the fitness center. Anyone else? I think that's it at the high school.
What's the status on the gymnasium roof?
The gymnasium roof is in good shape.
Okay.
The gymnasium roof and the roof on top of the cafeteria are really in great shape. There's no reason to touch them. For some reason, the cafeteria roof got done at a different time than the other roofs. I'm not sure when that happened. Maybe it was part of the 2010 or something. But the high school cafeteria roof is in good shape.
Okay.
So at Bechtel, they're going to do all those main wings. Brookside, they're going to do the main wings. And, you know, by mid-July, we'll have all of the 4 major buildings re-roofed. And we'll stop taking water in every time it rains. Because if you can't stop the water coming in, you got a lot of other problems coming. So that was project 1.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve item E, re-roofing project?
I move that we approve the re-roofing project.
There's a second? So Jeannie and Robert. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And now we are at Nikki again. Let's discuss the fund balance policy.
You don't want to talk about rezoning?
Is there?
I was
Did I
just
miss
gonna
one?
have fun.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
Mark
sorry.
is gonna do an update.
Yeah. So I put this on the agenda because I want to make sure the board is all crystal clear on where we're at with the property of Blosser. We went through about 1.5 years of painful work to get this rezoned to R2. So if you look where Kids Club is, to the left of Kids Club and all the way back to Locust, there's a 6.5, close to 7 acre parcel back in there that we had rezoned to R2, which means it can be multi or single family residential. The community is in desperate need of housing. There is very little housing in town, and there's virtually no low-cost housing in town. This property had a value of 1.2 million. I have to be honest, I think that's pretty high. However, now that we have that, in a sense, you have an ace card in your hand where you have property that is saleable. The reason we had to wait till now is because we had to go out and let all the other entities know who get first right of refusal on that property. So the charter school, public entities, the county, any public agency gets what's called first right of refusal to buy the property if they wanted to. None of them have chose to do that, and the time frame for them to ask to do that has passed. We have an appraisal done on it. Literally, the only thing the board would need to do to sell it would be to go to a realtor and say, we want to sell it, or advertise it on your own. Remember that you do not have to sell it in whole. You could sell it in parts. You could parcel the front of it and put 5 or 6 houses right after you come off Locust Street. Or you can hold it. You can do whichever you'd like to do, but that is an ace in the hole. I will tell you, the city will probably pressure you guys to put houses there because it's really tough to find houses. And you're holding on to the best property in the community to put houses on. Right smack in downtown, between 2 schools and a rock's throw from Safeway. So it's a premium piece of property that you have at your disposal. Everything's been done now to allow you to use that if you choose to use that. I don't we don't really need to have a debate about whether you want to sell it or not sell it tonight, because that's not really relevant. If you want to do that, we'll have a debate about it at some point, and you put it out there and say, we're going to do it or not do it. I just want to let you know the status of it, that it is free and clear, and it is at your discretion now to use to sell for housing if you choose to do so. So that was a major hurdle to get through, but you have a super valuable piece of property now in your pocket.
Would the board like to have a more in-depth conversation on whether or not to sell this property? If so, I would suggest we include that in our special meeting that we're going to do in early May.
Yeah, I'd like a little more in-depth discussion.
Anybody else?
That's fine with me.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll add it to the agenda for our special meeting in early May.
Okay. And again, you're not under obligations. You just need to figure out what you want to do.
Okay, I think that's worthwhile. Any further discussion on this? Now we'll get to the one I tried to get to, discussion of fund balance policy. Nikki.
Okay, so I know this had come up as a request that we begin the process of discussing our policy on fund balance and reserves. And so we have this on here as a discussion item. And what I'm thinking is that if we kind of get some guidance from the board on the direction we'd like to go, then we can begin the process of drafting an actual board policy, and we would take it through the normal steps of having a first and second reading of that. As some background information, I wanted to let you know that, or remind you, I think most of us know from when we discuss budget, that the state minimum for the reserve for economic uncertainties for a district our size is 3%. And our current board policy does not dictate anything above that. It's very our policy is very vague currently. It basically states that the board will maintain a balance to, in order to have sufficient fiscal solvency. And so I think that it would be beneficial for all of us to nail down maybe a percentage that we can, that I would have some clarity when I'm doing my board document or my budget documentation. Currently, what I do, because we do not have anything specific in the board policy, is I illustrate in our budget documents double the state minimum. So the state minimum is 3, I use 6. And the reason being is that before the laws changed around that reserve cap language, we are now exempt from that policy or from that law because of our small size. But prior to us becoming exempted from that, it was a good number for us to look at keeping that law in mind. That's really no longer relevant. I will tell you that the National Government Finance Officers Association and School Services of California recommend that districts maintain a balance equivalent to 2 months of operating expenditures. So that is about 17% of your budget. And so as a reference point, I went back and looked at where we were at with our second interim budget. Our entire total fund balance, ending fund balance, was projected to be $4.5 million. At our current expenditure levels, that is a 20%. However, some components of that fund balance are assigned to particular uses, such as supplemental concentration grant tied to the LCAP. And so when I look at just the unassigned components along with our 6% reserve amount that we show, it's 3.4 million, which constitutes a 15%. So where we are currently at, I think, is very close to that recommendation of the 17%. Typically, the board policies around this, they also recommend that you build in some language that discusses different types of circumstances around it. So for instance, if you were to have to dip into it or you fall below that percentage, it kind of creates a pathway to building back to it. So let's say we as a district needed to use the funds for some contingency or emergency, that we then would say, okay, we're going to add a certain amount back over the next 2 years or 3 years or something to help us, recommit to that designated level. So it's more than just throwing a percentage out there, although I think the percentage is important to discuss. The policy will likely also include some other language around, how to maintain that in different types of situations. So, do you guys have other questions about this or thoughts?
I do.
Okay.
With respect to as an example, in some cases, you track cash flow and kind of discuss the reserve for economic uncertainties in the context of cash flow. Would you?
Okay. Yeah, that's a really important distinction to make. So we often talk about fund balance, and there is a big difference between our fund balance and our cash flow. And that has to do with the timelines by which we are allocated the funding that we use. So, very often for instance, Title I is a program where we are allocated a certain amount per year. However, they don't just give us the cash up front. They essentially reimburse us after we have already incurred the expense. So we are bearing sort of a cash flow burden on that on a consistent and rotating basis. We also have unique situations that come up, such as this year where we saw the state resolve their budget woes by putting in place cash deferrals to the payment structure for our primary funding, the local control funding formula. And so essentially we have funds that we will show as revenue for this year, but we will not receive the cash for it until next school year. And so the cash flow and the fund balance can be very different because of these timing issues. When we look at fund balance, there are a lot of reasons to maintain a healthy fund balance. And, they are things like planning for emergencies, preparing for the possibility if there were reductions from the state that we would have time to adjust in a thoughtful way instead of like reactionary on the spot reductions and things like that. It's better for program continuity. But another huge reason to maintain a strong fund balance is to protect our cash flows. So in this year where we experienced a lot of deferrals, we anticipated that we may even need to do some borrowing in order to make payroll and things at certain points in the year. And it turned out that we did not need to do that. We had a sufficient cash balance, and part of that is because we maintain a healthy fund balance. And so, for a district, if they get into a cash flow situation where they become short on cash and cannot cover their obligations, meet payroll, they're in a situation where they have to borrow, and that costs money. That's not something where we can just borrow for 0% interest. Typically, we end up paying fees and interest rates related to that borrowing. And so it saves us money ultimately to have an appropriate fund balance when we get into cash flow situations. And it also helps with cash flow when it comes to, larger type projects. We got, for instance, a couple of years ago, we did several bus grants, right? And with those situations, we were able to move forward on ordering and getting the buses in place and buying them. And then we get reimbursed and we get the grant money after the fact. You know, those are several $100,000 expenditures that we're able to float until we get the revenue from them. So there's a lot of issues around cash that I think are tied to that, the fund balance levels. Another thing that I think is important when it comes to fund balance, in fact, we just went through this process and we talked about it earlier, is the credit rating process. So we went out for a bond, and as part of that process, we go through a credit rating with, you know, the large like Moody's and Standard & Poor and whatnot. And we maintained a good credit rating. And I believe part of that is because we were able to illustrate that we have a healthy fund balance. Not having that in place can impact your credit rating, which in turn impacts the cost of doing the financing for a bond that could then cause higher costs for the taxpayers. So it's just responsible, I think, in many ways for us to have a healthy fund balance.
Nikki, I want to chime in on that. Remember that 2 years from now, you're going to be putting on another bond to get another 4 million. That is another reselling of bonds, and they go through the entire process again, and you get rated again. And those ratings affect the percentage of interest you're going to pay on your loans and the quality of the bond and who buys them and how much they buy them for. So having a 2% fund balance going in there will not be a positive thing for selling bonds in a couple years. And I know nobody's presenting that as an option, but that is a real thing for the district, because you're probably going to issue in the next 10 years 2 to 3 more sets of bonds.
And when we went through that process, actually, the folks who were interviewing us for the credit rating process did inquire about our fund balance and reserve policy. And I think it would really be beneficial to us to have this memorialized in a written policy instead of just a practice that we have maintained a good balance. And that's a great practice to show, but it means more to them to have it cemented in a policy.
So Nikki, do you have a policy in mind that you can plagiarize from another district?
Yeah, I have several examples. I also have an article that I got from School Services, which provides some recommendations, as I mentioned, around some of the other language to include. So I don't think it will be difficult for us to draft something.
Can you send copies of some of those samples out to the board along with a draft of what you think might be an appropriate policy?
Sure, absolutely.
We can bleed all over your draft and maybe incorporate some of the things from those other policies.
Sure. Yep, we can do that.
We don't get any interest, do we, on that money?
Actually, we do. So it sits in the county treasury, and we do receive interest payments on it.
So what is it?
It's
Not
not a few $1,000s.
It's not like the old days.
No, I mean, isn't it similar to the banks? It's like 1/4% or something, or is it like a whole 2%?
It depends. So it's very dependent on, what interest rates are at the time, and it fluctuates. I have a spreadsheet that I could provide you that shows some historical interest rates that it gets done on a quarterly basis for us, and they accumulate all of that data on one worksheet, and it is interesting to see it. It goes up and down quite a bit. And but it is like the bank where you think, oh, interest rate, yay, and then when you see the actual dollars that it comes to, it's not a killing amount of money that we get, but we do get a little bit of interest on it.
Well, it's largely because we haven't had a whole lot to leave in there.
Yeah, and rates are definitely down quite a bit right now.
Yeah, no, it's real down in a regular bank. But what I'm concerned with is, does it go in like a CD or something where we give it 6 months or whatever? Or is it just like we could pull what we need when we need it? I mean,
No, yeah,
that,
we maintain liquidity on that.
oh, okay.
So because it goes into the county treasury, and they have,
Mhm.
I think you guys see, you periodically get the reports from the county treasury on their investments. And so they
Yeah.
invest on behalf of all of the agencies who are deposited with them. And they have an entire policy around liquidity and access to funds. So I have never been aware of a circumstance where an agency did not have immediate access to their funds.
Okay.
I just want to say that I'm taking the Masters in Governments program through the California School Board Association, and this weekend is course number 3, which is school finance. So
oh, perfect.
I'll ask some questions and see if I can get any input from any of the presenters or any of the other school districts. So
that would be great. I did kind of poke around on their website to see if I could locate if they had like a formal position on a percentage or some number that they recommend. And I really couldn't find anything like that. You know, they do have a lot of articles and blogs and things that discuss considerations that districts should keep in mind as they develop their local policies. And I think it's a lot of the things we've all talked about many times, but I couldn't find anything particular on a percentage. So I'd be real curious to hear if they offer something like that for you.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you, Nikki. And let's see, we are at public comments for items not on the agenda.
Alex, I think you should do one about having a board meeting on May 5th.
Okay.
And do you want to share with community the process on hiring a superintendent?
I think that would be wise to do exactly that. So I believe, does the board have any issue with meeting at 4 o'clock on May 5th?
For closed and then 5 for open.
Correct.
We'll
Sounds
still
like-
meet the following week?
Yes, we will still meet for our regular meeting the following week.
Oh, okay, good then. Okay.
Go ahead, Tessa.
Thank you. My green screen is doing something really weird. I had forgotten to mention that we, WTA, and potentially CSEA would really like to be involved in the selection process for a new superintendent. I don't know if that's traditionally something that happens. We understand that we wouldn't have any vote or say in it, but it would be nice to be included in the process if that is the purpose for the May 5th meeting.
That is part of the reason for that meeting, Tessa, and believe me, we have not forgotten you. You will be getting more information very soon. For both you and
Okay, thank you. Okay, great, thank you.
One more item I would like to add to the next agenda, if the rest of the board has any, at least a little bit of agreement. Jeannie, for example, you're taking the CSBA leadership government class, correct? Is the district paying for that for you?
yes, I asked the district to pay for it for me.
Right. So I'm suggesting that, I would like to suggest that the district create a budget item for the board for board education. For example, for publications, subscriptions for a variety of different periodicals, and in cases like Jeannie's going through, educational opportunities, so that we can have, we can basically take advantage of those opportunities without necessarily having to necessarily say, Mother, may I? I think it's one of those cases where a little more education for all of us can be beneficial moving forward.
That's no problem. Do you have an amount that you would like to see, or?
I think about, if it was up to me, I would suggest like a $500 maximum per board member, or a total of that in that say $2,500 in that account. And then, but I think that's something we need to discuss and flesh out a little bit more. I'm not looking for a stipend or anything for a meeting, but if we don't use it, you lose it kind of a thing. In other words, one year, if you take a bunch of classes and you use your $500, great. If you don't, then so be it. Maybe it's available for somebody who takes a more extensive program. So
yeah, I was gonna say, there's probably a difference in terms of cost. So like if you're talking about publications and things, that would easily fit within that amount. When we get into like programs and professional development courses, the costs for that do tend to be higher. So I would expect that we would probably need to set the amount higher per person if it's those types of things. So
and I appreciate that, and I think that it bears some discussion at a board meeting, especially if we can find out what some of these programs cost. Again, I'm not adverse to spending a certain amount of my own hard-earned dollars on some of this stuff as well, and have in the past. But it's also nice where with some of us that can afford it, it's great, but some of us can't necessarily afford to spend a whole lot of money on education when you're not getting a whole lot behind a replace for it. So anyway, let's have a further discussion.
I just want to say this is a wonderful time to take advantage of some of this training because it's done online. So so that you don't have to, the first course I took, which was the course for new board members, I paid for my own expenses down to the Bay Area and for hotel and food and all that. But since it's all online now, that's all that has to be paid for is the cost of the course. So anyway, it's a good time to take advantage of that kind of training.
CSBA has a program where I believe it's $300 per board member, gives you access to a whole wide range of classes for up to a year. So,
nice.
But
traditionally, Alex, it's about $1,000 a board member is what you plan, because you have mileage expenses, a meal expense. Occasionally there's an overnight, but most of them aren't. But usually that's a good figure. 5,000 is probably the right number to put in there.
Okay. Well, let's discuss it some more at the next. Discuss it some more at the next board meeting. We'll immortalize it as an action item and move on from there.
Yeah.
Anything else for the next board agenda meeting? Next board agenda.
I was thinking that it might be good if we discussed what kind of testing program for COVID that the district wants to roll out, if we want to expand it to testing kids. Mark and I have kind of been talking about that, and at what time would that be appropriate to roll it out to students and the staffing that we need to do that. I don't know if that's something that we should discuss at a board meeting.
Is there a cost associated with that testing program now?
Yes.
Yeah, so each test, Mark, is $5, and the cost of uploading each test is $1.50. Now that, things are changing every day with the testing, the state is going to fund the testing, I believe. Mark, did you get anything on that?
Not yet, but that's the discussion.
Yeah.
But right now, our student testing is if they are symptomatic, we offer the testing to the parent. We don't ever require it, we offer it. The staff,
I don't think legally you can require it.
No, however, you can't.
So, but I would argue that wouldn't the COVID funds that we're anticipating cover the testing anyway?
The problem with the state covers it, and it's separate from the funding because they're really wanting to test students twice a week. The charter school is now testing students in Willits twice a week. So I think that the state is going to move towards that to keep the schools open, and it won't be part of the funding per school district. It'll be their program that they fund.
I think the part that we would maybe consider using the COVID funds for, and we've already discussed this for the testing that's underway now, is staff costs related to doing the testing.
Right.
Yeah, it's a little invasive. It might slow down the start of the school morning. You're going to be pulling about 8 people, 2 from each building, to do that. And so, I'm not sure, I realize that other districts are starting to test students. I'm lukewarm on it at best. I'm more concerned that we keep our adults functioning, and the students who are symptomatic, we certainly can do that with.
Is there anything stopping us from employing volunteers to do the testing?
Yes. Training, liabilities, that kind of stuff. I don't think you want to do that. Nobody's using volunteers. There's some, surprisingly, even though the test is simplistic, there's some pretty intense training you have to do, and ways you handle it and how you handle it. And the testing of students is something that, I don't know. It's one of those issues of, are we going to have parents who are furious that we want to test them and refuse to test? What do we do if they refuse to test? I don't know if we want to open up that can.
I would think that parents that don't want their kids tested, their kids just don't get tested.
Yeah, they don't sign. So when you log on to register for the test, it has a consent form that you have to sign that's online, and you can also print out for on-site for people who have problems with the internet to do. So yeah, it's not something that you mandate. I could just see if the cases rise again, catching 1 or 2 cases before they're in the classroom would be beneficial, or before it spreads. I don't know. I'm up in the air just like Mark is. We've been talking about it. I just kind of wanted to bring the conversation to the table because it would be a district-wide.
Do we have parents or students requesting it?
I have not. But okay. Alex, I think if we continue to trend well, I would lean heavily towards not doing it. If our trend starts to turn the other way, I think we ought to have the discussion.
So right now, student testing is centered around whether or not somebody starts to show some symptoms.
Right.
Yeah, if they have a fever or anything, and then I train people at every site so they can test the students at the site right there and know 15 minutes later, and then do the protocol that it's set up at every school to isolate and notify and all of that.
But that's for the student who arrives at school, doesn't have a fever, but a little bit later in the day starts feeling bad. You check, they have a fever. Now we can suggest a test.
Well, at all the grade schools, they're taking the temperatures. It's different. We're not doing the temperatures at the high school. So they would actually catch the kid with a fever before they came to school, or at school if a kid starts getting sick and they feel their head. So, the precautions of taking the temperature in the morning is there for K-5, right, Mark?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think where it hits the fan, Alex, is after they read that consent form, they're going to think they were going into bypass surgery and realize that they're.
I get all that. I'm just trying to figure out which kids we're catching now. For example, it's like you said, K-5, we check their temperature before they even, as they get out of the vehicle, or before they even go into a classroom. If they have a temperature, they don't go in the classroom, but I'm assuming we offer testing in that case.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
We do.
All right.
Yeah, and Alex, when they find out also that their information gets put in the federal database of COVID testing, parents are not going to be real fond of that. So it's good, and we can do it, and they do it really well. It's just the reading through that consent form and then realizing you're putting your data out there. Let's just say I would struggle at Sherwood mightily to get a lot of people signing the form.
Right. Well, would somebody send me a copy of that consent form, number one? And number two, let's discuss this also at our May 5 meeting.
Yeah, and we could just decide, if the numbers climb, then we'll start testing or have some form of plan like that. But
yeah, I think that's fine. It's good to be looking forward for that.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else for the meeting? Anything else that's not on the agenda?
Hi, Alex. This is Charlene from WEX.
Go ahead.
We would like to join your literacy committee.
Okay.
From kindergarten to 3rd grade.
Great, Charlotte. Obviously, you should be working through Kathleen, but why don't you go ahead and send me an email?
No, she's from Willits Elementary Charter School. right,
Oh.
Charlie?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what WEX is.
Yeah.
Yes, I am.
Awesome.
Please send me an email.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you. A motion to adjourn. I think Diane is motioning to adjourn.
She got the
Despite-
silent adjourn in.
Is there a second? Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Good
Thank
night.
you, everybody. Great meeting.
Night.
Talk to you again soon.